Good afternoon and welcome back to Techweek TV, brought to you by Callaghan Innovation. We're here in Auckland today at Callaghan Innovation on Quay Street, and today this panel is on automation in AgriTech. A year on, we're going to be visiting how the world will be fed. How the world will be fed in 2050. We're going to be looking at meat alternatives and the technology in this space. And it's my immense honour to be presenting this panel today. There's some very impressive people joining us from all walks of the AgriTech space. And Bridget, Alistair, Kate and Peter, thank you so much for being here. Fascinated to hear more about all of your stories and what you're doing in this space. And I know to kick us off, we're going to go through a few presentations and then we're going to go into some questions following that. So I'll hand over to Peter now to do a bit of an overview on AgriTech New Zealand and go through the presentation.
Thanks very much, Jake. So we were established as an organisation about 12 months ago. In fact, yesterday was our first anniversary. But like all anniversaries, there's a bit of a backstory. And our journey, I guess, began 3 or 4 years ago when we realised that interest in agritech was growing globally. People realised it was no longer just about tractors and gumboots. It was about drones and robotics and the types of technologies that other members of the panel represent. And what we wanted to do was to bring together a group of stakeholders in New Zealand, government stakeholders, industry stakeholders, corporate startup, investors and research, so that New Zealand, has been quite a small country, could begin to talk with a common voice and begin to sell a more compelling and cohesive story, particularly offshore. And we've seen that happen, and certainly in the last 12 months, we've seen a significant increase in the amount of investment being made into agritech in New Zealand. And it's a journey which clearly we are really now only just beginning, but I think New Zealand, there's no reason why as a country we shouldn't take a global leadership position, given the size and scale of our primary sector. Absolutely. And our opportunity with the innovation and the great innovators that we've got. So yeah, that's the journey that we're on, and it's one that we're just beginning. It's
very exciting. Thank you so much. So we've got some presentations to go through. I believe the next one is the talking presentation. Alistair, you're going to take us through the next presentation.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I might have this run the wrong way. It's the video is going to play, so I think my notes here might be a little bit.
I'm always sort of looking at where we're going to be in 5 years and 10 years' time. I think about things like what happens in the world without bees? How do we pollinate our crops? How do we become more efficient at what we do? So when I met Alistair and saw the talent that was there, I got really excited. And I was also very keen about how do we start to create those moments of empowerment where we can take young, talented people and give them a place where they can actually experiment and start to create new technologies.
We really started in the shed out the back of an orchard in Te Puna, Tauranga, which is pretty awesome that we've got orchards across the road. We can roll robots into there, do testing, pick kiwi fruit. I really like it that we're not just sitting in a lab simulating what we're going to do. It just helps maintain that culture of the team to be positioned where we are, and tied to the original building where we started. It is pretty cool too.
We feel really proud to be a New Zealand-based technology business. We're growing very quickly and we're really excited. The team here are working really hard.
We've got a pretty creative team here that can come up with some pretty amazing solutions.
When you look at our team, we've got a really good diverse range from recent graduates all the way through to senior engineers. With the team that we've developed, there's no problem we can't solve.
At the end of the day, it's all about the people within our organisations and the skills that they have, and the people that we partner with and collaborate with.
We're actually trying to solve real problems, not creating a technology distantly and then trying to implement it in. It's exciting that we're starting to achieve that.
Fantastic. It was very, very inspiring to learn more, and thank you so much for playing that. I just want to understand a little bit more about, when you are in the industry where you are really pushing things forward and creating world-changing technology that doesn't exist. What are the biggest challenges you face time and time again that you come up against?
Ooh, deep question. It's really, I think, is probably taking some of the partners on the journey with it as well, because it's understanding that there's some technology that could potentially be a solution to a challenge they're having, but it's getting that understanding and probably seeing how it can integrate into existing systems, or how existing systems can actually change and adapt because of the technology. there's often a sort of a vision within automation that you come in, or sensing technologies that you come in and you're replicating what's been done there existing. But often with this technology, it's actually a step change or a complete way of shifting how they might be doing it in operation. That actually becomes quite interesting, how you can actually change processes and systems within that.
And where did your sort of passion originally come from for this space?
I grew up dairy farming, so I really enjoy that application of technology into real challenges and real world problems. So it's finding that, for me, is I think what really gets me up in the morning. That work.
And outside of the work you're doing, where do you think the greatest opportunities are in AgriTech for smart entrepreneurs to build valuable companies today?
I think there's so many opportunities across AgTech in general. There's no shortage of opportunities in that space. If you sort of compare the AgriTech side to what we've seen in sort of general industrial automation within industries, they've really leapfrogged where I think AgTech is in general. We're still in an age where it's very labour intensive, and it's finding ways to help complement that and bring technologies through to really make that industry more efficient.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Alistair. I look forward to coming back soon with some more questions. But in the meantime, I'll pass over to Kate, who's going to take us through her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So at ZD, we kind of realised a while ago that there was a bit of a problem in farming. So most pasture farms use supplementary feed at times during the year to supplement the animals' feed. And a lot of this is wasted, and that's really due to inefficiencies in the farming system. But it comes down to poor utilisation of feed. So often animals are fed too much or they're not fed enough. And the wastage can be on a really basic level. So it can be things like damage from the weather. When it rains, the feed gets damaged. And then things like spillage. The cows come in and they push feed over, and then it's all gone. And average dairy farm is spending kind of $150,000 a year on supplementary feed in New Zealand. So it's a big business. And this is happening overseas as well. And we like to kind of say that there's a bit of a greedy cow problem, but it doesn't just stem to cows, it's happening in all different animals. So kind of what we do at ZD is we automate feeding. So we enable control feeding that gives the farmers insights into how livestock's being fed. And we're making sure that the right energy and nutrition reaches the right animal at the right time, and that's critical. And that means that there's no wastage. And this is making our farmers more profitable and efficient, and actually more sustainable for the future. So this is a ZD. There's 4 feed bays in the ZD, and then one ZD will feed up to 300 cows. But we don't just feed cows. We feed sheep. We feed deer. We can feed basically anything that has an RFID tag. And how it works: the animal walks up to the machine. It recognises which animal it is via its RFID tag, and then it will dispense amount of feed based on what the farmer set it to feed. So what we're trying to do is trying to feed smaller amounts of feed multiple times a day. And the farmer can set all this information via their dashboard. And that allows the farmer can do things like set up alerts so they can know when the feed is, there's no feed in the machine, and that means that they don't have to go down to the paddock to fill it up. So it's just basic efficiencies. But what we're doing is we're saving the farmer a lot of money in terms of inefficiency. So that's kind of what we do at ZD.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And I read that your company's based in the Manawatu.
Yes, we
obviously,
are.
how do you, a question that people might have is, one thing that's really surprised me this week is all these amazing tech companies based in places where you might not think that they are.
Yeah.
And the fact that they exist and that there's so much amazing tech talent fueling them. So have you found that to be a challenge to attract the best people to build this software in places like that?
I think at times it's a challenge. I think for us, what we've realised we need to do is we need to look after our staff. Once we get them, it's all about looking after this. I think in some ways it's a really positive thing because we've got farms at our doorstep. We can test, we can go out to a farm, it's a 2-minute drive to a dairy farm. So I think it's probably more of a positive than a negative.
That's very cool. And how do you drive people towards the purpose of your company?
So I think where we kind of looking at is we're trying to make farming more sustainable for the future, and I think that's exciting for a lot of people. A lot of people kind of want to make farming more sustainable, more efficient and more profitable. So yeah, it's not that hard, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking us through that. Yeah, and I'll pass over to Bridget now, who's going to do a bit of a presentation on sorry, I'll pass that over.
Oh.
Great.
Is that slide showing? Yeah. So Regen's a company I founded nearly 10 years ago, and the purpose is to be able to use technology to enable farmers to make better decisions. So not necessarily do anything different, but have the information behind it to know how to optimise both water and effluent irrigation. So the key to it is actually getting that information right at a farmer's fingertips when they need it. So like this is one of our customers down in Canterbury, and he's out doing his work. He can look at the app on the phone and at any point in time know soil moisture status, the weather forecast, should he be irrigating effluent, should he be irrigating his water. And what that does by enabling you in the moment to know the right thing to do, is take that action, to be able to record it. You've got that information to demonstrate that you've been compliant, but also to demonstrate that you're being sustainable. And our purpose as a business is to enable rivers to sparkle and farmers to stand tall.
Mm-hmm. So nice.
And both of those things are really important. The impact of all types of land use on the environment has to move towards being more sustainable. But at the same time, farmers are out there growing food for us to eat every single day, and they deserve to be able to be proud of that and the work that they do. So we're taking some pretty simple technology actually and putting it in the hands of farmers to empower them to stand tall.
That's amazing. And what's the greatest feedback you get from your customers when they're adopting this automation technology?
They always learn something they didn't know about their farm. So again, data from sensors is another piece of information. It's not instead of. So it's very additive to what they know, and they learn and get an insight they didn't have before. Yeah. And just that confidence and peace of mind they get that if they're ever challenged, they've actually got a really sound basis to show this is why I did what I did.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated to know more about your story and how you first came up with this idea. And you mentioned it was 10 years ago. What was kind of that lightning bulb moment for you that made you go ahead and start this business?
Well, unfortunately, it wasn't a lightning bolt. It's one of those, like most things in life, you sort of zigzag along, and then next thing, there I had a company.
Okay.
But actually, the genesis of it was when rural broadband was being rolled out before there was Netflix. Yeah. So Telecom at the time was saying, well, what possibly content could there be that it might want to make a farmer want to have a broadband connection? Absolutely. And at the same time, the price of sensors were coming down, the cloud became a thing. So a set of enabling technologies came together. Absolutely. And then, the ideas of how this could be used became Regen.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah, and Kate, when developing Zeddy, what are some of the lessons you learned that you would pass on to other people looking to go into the AgriTech space? Yeah,
so when I look at it from probably an R&D perspective, naively probably, when we first came up with the idea, we spent all this time on this prototype, designing it and researching it, and then we spent all this time testing in-house. And then we took it out to the field, and we couldn't work out why it didn't work. And we realised, with AgriTech, you've got so many different other impacts. The way the farmers, the weather, the animals, animal behaviour, the way the farmers use something. So now, when we look at our testing procedure, we, fast forward that first couple of steps, and we get things out to the farm as quick as we possibly can, and we test in real conditions. So that's been a really interesting kind of learning curve at the start. We didn't kind of do that, and now we've kind of got it,
Yeah. And what it's similar to the question I put to Bridget, what have you found to be some of the biggest barriers to entry to, farmers picking up this new technology? And
so I think my husband and I are farmers, and when we started farming 7 years ago, there was not that much technology in terms of farming, and it's changed quite dramatically. And as any industry, you have people that adopt it really well initially, and you have people that are a little bit overwhelmed by it and they don't know how to adopt it. So I think the education piece it's up to us as technologists to kind of educate them, and sometimes that can be hard. And I think when we look at especially automation in farming, New Zealand is a little bit behind some of European countries, so we have a job to kind of educate them and the benefits and how that can make them more profitable,
Yeah.
and you know, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and with all of your businesses, you mentioned your farming backgrounds. How important do you think that is for people going into the AgriTech sector? Can some city guy come up with an idea for a startup and go and rock up to a farm in the Waikato and start pitching it to farmers, or is that probably just not going to work?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think they can.
Okay.
It's fundamentally though around engagement
Okay.
and understanding the problem. And I think it just gives us an advantage. We've probably had that exposure to connecting with the people you're dealing with, and then also being able to understand what the problem is and sort of speak the language, I guess, of digging in behind what they really want. And it's that part. So I think they'll probably go through a rather steep learning curve,
Yes,
but
yeah.
it's been embedded within that environment, and really understanding it, I think, will be the key part.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think one of the things that we often come up against, or certainly learn in our interviews, is that importance of like founder market fit as well, right? Of like, why are you the right person to solve this problem? So I'm sure it is like helpful having that intimate understanding, but it's not to say that somebody else that's not passionate about it from the outside can't come in and give it a crack. Yeah, and Peter, what have you found in terms of watching the sector evolve over the past 5 years? What are the biggest changes you've noticed? And you spoke a little bit about this earlier, but going forward, what do you think over the next, say, 10 years will be the biggest changes in AgriTech?
I think they're going to be significant. I mean, Kate just already mentioned, as a farmer, 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of tech on the farm.
Yeah.
That's completely changed now.
Yeah.
I think 5 years ago, the amount of investment going into technology on the farm was quite low. And certainly at the time I was living in Silicon Valley, and I saw the kind of light bulb go on there where investors suddenly realized that it was no longer just about tractors and gumboots. It was about drones and robots and big data. And they knew a lot about that, but they never actually applied it to the agricultural sector. They then remembered it was a $4 trillion annual market in terms of food. And so that investment has really encouraged the growth. And we're now talking about the digital farm of the future.
Yeah.
And farmers will have far more effective tools. And I think New Zealand is really well placed to be at the vanguard of that particular movement. Part of it is because of our appreciation of the land. Part of it is because of that existence of a very vibrant primary sector. But one of the most recent developments, I think, which is going to encourage this is a decision taken at the end of last year for all of government to establish an all of government AgriTech task force. And if you put that into context, up till this moment in time, the only all of government task force has been around tourism. So I think it reflects government's kind of the significance of the sector for them, not just in terms of improving productivity and generating more dollars for New Zealand, but also the environmental side as well. How can we get clean water, looking at climate change, looking at changing land use. And so actually having all of government behind the AgriTech sector, I think, is a huge move going forward.
Yeah, speaking of your time in Silicon Valley, I remember I was talking to my friend Craig Piggott, who's got the company Halter, and he was saying how when he first raised the capital, he was, I think, on the farm, and the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley were like moving the cows at like 4 a.m. or something, and he said they were very impressed by that, which is, you can imagine. Talking about, for farmers who might be tuning in here or watching this segment on replay, what's the best way for all of your advice to farmers actually about staying ahead of the technological curve? Because it can be so easy to get left behind, and I can imagine it's 80-20 in the sense that a lot of the people you go and talk to really want to adopt this, and they're really open to new ideas, and there's others that have probably been families farming for the last 100 years that have always done things a certain way. So what's your advice about staying ahead of the curve, maybe starting with you, Kate?
I think it's about education. It's about self-educating, researching what's out there and researching what can make a difference. Not everything's going to work on your farm, and I think you have to pick a couple of things that are going to make a real difference to you, and then kind of fully immerse yourself with that technology. So, that would be my comment.
Yeah, I'd probably emphasise on that education standpoint, and that's not a deep level. Just, I was sort of reflecting back on younger years, I've seen there's a lot of people sort of almost throwing stuff at farmers. Hey, this is the next greatest thing, this is the next thing you should be using, this is the application you should be having. And I think it's having enough knowledge in the background to be making key decisions on, hey, is this actually right for my operation? And then also influencing the technology. And I think New Zealand's a standpoint, how do we actually absorb that farming knowledge to actually influence how we're developing the technology that they'll ultimately adopt? Because there needs to be that impetus, and I think that on-farm testing, is just absolutely critical, and we found the same of making sure you're actually in that environment.
Exactly.
Testing that side of things is going to be key.
And as you've taken your technology to the world, what have been the biggest challenges? And are you finding that the challenges farmers are facing in other countries are identical to the ones back here, or is each individual market quite different?
I think there's some subtleties in different markets, but fundamentally the same challenges.
Yes.
And we're seeing that in some of the larger markets as well, and that's well, for us at least, with where we are with the automation side coming through, is I think there is those same challenges around how do we actually get people to do the work that is quite hard. It's repetitive, stressful work at times, and how do we get that labour force to be able to assist and get these crops off, get the crops planted, look after them, and across those different avenues. And you're hearing similar stories across the ag sector.
Absolutely. Is there a country, you mentioned how New Zealand, Peter, can lead this space, and certainly is in many ways by all the impressive founders we've been speaking to, but who at the moment, is there a country in the world that's miles ahead and sort of leading the space, or is it?
I wouldn't say miles ahead, but there are certain countries that have possibly started working with more focus in the sector. So
Okay.
I think of countries like Israel. I think of countries like Holland, maybe Ireland. There's certainly a lot of activity in North America. But I think New Zealand's not far behind. We've got all the right components. It's just making sure that those components work more closely together.
Yeah.
And we've had those components for some time. Again, going back to that connection to the land, that's hugely important. And that's one of the big differences. You mentioned, asked the question before, in terms of whether city tech types can get involved in AgriTech. Well, they can, but I've been in Silicon Valley and I've seen AgriTech companies there with 300 staff, and only 5 have ever kind of come from a farming background. And so there's a big disconnect. They may understand the AI, they might understand the machine learning tools. They don't really understand the farming problems that farmers face. So I think we do have a huge advantage in that particular area.
Yeah, having spent a lot of time there myself, that does sound like the most Silicon Valley thing ever. And Bridget, what is sort of how do you think, a lot of people watching this won't be from, say, a farming background per se, so how do you think that this technology over the next 10 years will impact the lives of everyday Kiwis?
I think for everyday Kiwis, even though they perhaps don't feel they have a connection directly with farming, every day they eat something or drink some milk, they actually do have a connection. And technology will enable that food to be produced more efficiently, more sustainably, better quality control, more options to be either high-end or boutique, or so. I think their experience is the same for farmers. It's an evolution, not a revolution. So again, for farmers looking to take up technology, you don't need to, it's really hard if you don't do anything and then 20 years later think I've got to actually get into all of these different things. So just taking it a step at a time.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah. And just final advice from anyone on sort of advice for people that are watching this that might want to go and start something in the AgriTech space. What would you say to them as a final parting piece of advice?
I'd say, first of all, again, going back to something I said before, there are huge numbers of opportunities. And I think one of the challenges in New Zealand is very often we look at the technology sector and we look at the primary sector and pretend they're very different. In fact, there's a massive amount of convergence, and a lot of New Zealand's long-term value will come from applying AgriTech to our oldest and most traditional industry, which remains farming.
Yes, absolutely. Any other advice?
Probably be bold, be big, go for it.
I agree.
This stuff is feasible and it's tangible out in New Zealand. But I think, as we've said a few times through this, it's connecting though and understanding the real problem that you're trying to solve, and making sure you're not a tech company delivering tech that's from sort of an engineering standpoint, making sure you're flipping that around and it's from the end user standpoint. I think will be the big difference between successful tech and tech that looks cool.
Couldn't agree more. Coming back to what problem is this actually solving? Who's the market it's serving? Why doesn't it exist? How can we uniquely win in this space? All fundamental questions, right? Guys, thank you so very much for taking the time. It's super fascinating, and I think the sector is really interesting, inspiring, and the work you're all doing in different ways is incredible. So thank you so much for taking the time, Bridget, Alistair, Kate, Peter. Really appreciate your time, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to the viewers for tuning in this afternoon on Techweek TV. We have a few more sessions to come this afternoon on day 5 of what has been a massive week, so continue to stick around. Thank you so much to Callaghan Innovation for hosting us today and enabling this session, and we look forward to seeing you back here shortly for more great content on Techweek TV. Thank you so much.